Chair of the committee, and I will be chairing tonight. The event is being streamed live on YouTube, and members of the public and media are welcome to watch the meeting remotely and listen to the discussions taking place. Now I'd like to welcome everyone who is here in Committee Room 1 and everyone who is watching on YouTube. Before we proceed with the meeting, I would ask members of the committee to please make sure your mobiles are on silent or switched off. And I think it would be appropriate now to start the meeting with 72 seconds of silence to remember those who lost their lives in the tragedy.
Chair.
Thank you. So we move to A1, apologies for absence. Councillor James Husband has sent his apologies for this evening. Also, Kojo Sarpong has sent his apologies for this evening, and Jem Kamali. So, yeah, okay. So declarations of interest. Does any member have an interest to declare? No, that's fine. The action tracker and the minutes of the previous meeting have been circulated. Does the committee agree to sign them as a correct record? Well, I think, is this done here? Okay, I was the only person who was at the meeting. So I sign them as a correct. Okay, so agenda A4 item is the annual performance information for housing management needs. And Jahed is going to introduce it for us.
Thank you, Chair. So the housing management report confirms the outcome of the performance for some of the key performance indicators that housing management use that are reported to the Select Committee, and that was one of the recommendations made for the inspection for there to be oversight on our internal performance, both flat scrutiny as well as leadership. The report is really useful and confirms the complete outturn at the end of March. There's probably one thing to consider against the context behind this report. So whilst we've got a number of internal KPIs that each team is measured against, both internal performance against target, in November we had a cyber attack that compromised all of our housing management systems. As an immediate response to the cyber attack, the housing management team put a number of interim measures in place, an interim system for business continuity. So against that backdrop, and when you look at some of the outturns against target, it is quite impressive that in a number of areas, the team have not only met some of the target, but also outperformed in a number of areas. And that's a testament to the hard work and commitment of the housing management team. Since November, a number of our systems have now been restored. So we're moving away from some of those interim systems we introduced as a part of the cyber attack. So if I can take members to the first point on electrical safety, so 99.77% of our homes all have a valid electrical safety certificate, but we're required to have all of our homes have a valid safety certificate once every 5 years. We currently have 16 where we currently don't have a valid electrical safety certificate, and that's not because we haven't been trying. These are exceptional cases where we've had a number of difficulties in accessing the properties. In some areas, there were some level of vulnerability. In others, it's street boarding, where the boarding is to an extent where our contractors or our internal staff cannot get access to the relevant areas to carry out those checks. In these cases, the repairs team work really closely with our legal team, who are the first point of contact for our tenants, and also we're willing to work with adults or other external parties. We do so with the intention to get access to those properties. Sometimes it does take longer than we'd like, but again, where we need to then, as a result of the multi-agency approach, we still don't get access. As a last resort, we then take the legal route to get access to these properties. So again, overall, our target against the big six will always be 100% because it's a statutory requirement, but often our outturn may not always be 100% because of some of those operational challenges. For gas safety, again, really strong performance by the team. So every home that we manage for our tenants would need to have a yearly gas safety certificate. The outturn was 99.97%. And similarly, there were 2 homes at 7,500 properties that we manage where we couldn't get access. And again, they're going through the legal process in order for us to get the legal remedies to do a forced entry, and we needed to do the gas safety certificate. For fire safety, the performance for the fire safety risk assessment is 100%. So we do 2 types of fire safety risk assessment. In some blocks we do it once every 2 years, and others we do it once every 3 years. The repairs team have performed well in comparison to previous years. So whilst the average number of days to complete repairs 13.5 days, it is slightly again slightly above the target where we'd like them to be. When you look at a 3-year performance, it is a improvement over the longer term trend. With the repairs, we also undertake an independent company to carry out transactional surveys, and again, satisfaction remains really quite high with the number of repairs that we do against the residents that have been surveyed on the quality of the works and timeliness of the repair. On estate services, satisfaction relating to internal paying is 76% and external 79%. And cleaning is above target, and also for the end of the year, again, the cleaning team are doing really well. One of the things that I do every 2 weeks is do a routine estate walkabout with the team. So I'm not just relying on some of these figures. I do want to see internally and on our estate the level of cleanliness, and do some of the performance data that I see. How does that then reflect on the estate that I may visit? Sometimes they're organised visits, and sometimes they're random visits. Satisfaction with grounds maintenance was slightly below target. We employed 2 contractors to maintain our grounds maintenance, so that would be all of our grass on the estate as well as flower beds. And generally, the performance between the 2 externally appointed contractors, they perform really well. And I've been to ours an estate, and I've seen how well it is maintained, and that would be a similar story across the borough. What you generally find though with grounds maintenance is a slight dip during the sort of October to January period because of the weather, because that would then influence on obviously how much we can maintain the grass and so forth. One of the challenging areas we've had over the last 12 months is our performance on complaints. So, and that was significantly impacted by the cyber attack. So, all of our inboxes were not accessible immediately after the cyber attack. So, where complaints were logged, the team didn't have internal visibility of where those complaints were. Equally at the same time, in order to respond to some of those complaints, our internal team needed to have access to the database that they would use, rely on to coordinate a response. So in the short term, we had built up a backlog of complaints that needed to be assigned. First, not just assigned, understand the data that we've lost, the live complaints that were initially recorded pre-cyber attack. Once we had recovered that data, assigning those cases to the relevant team, who then were then responsible for coordinating the response. Some of those responses could only be provided once all of our systems were fully up and running. So I'm happy to confirm from an operational perspective, we're now in a position where we cleared the majority of the backlog of complaints from November to March, and the team are responding, and they've got the ability and the system ability to respond. Contact center was also impacted immediately after the cyber attack, but again, when you look at the outturn, the team exceeded the 90% calls answering for year end, achieving 94.84%. Rent collection was an area of concern immediately after the cyber attack. So for a period, we were not able to ask residents for making payments to the rent account because of the cyber attack. The financial files were not being posted on the rent account system. So internally, our staff didn't have full visibility of the rent account balance. That would then impact on their ability to understand who's in true arrears, contact the resident to notify them where possible, make agreement to pay. I'm happy to confirm, as of 3 weeks ago, that has now been fully restored. So our home ownership team that do the collection, both for service charge as well as income team, now can see the full account balance, and are now gradually contacting residents where they are in arrears, or residents who've not made a payment. I would clarify, since November till now, there has always been a mechanism for residents to continue paying. So there would have been 4 ways to pay. That was restricted to 2. So we anticipate the arrears level may go up slightly, but again, that activity to resume collection has now started. And then on antisocial behaviour and safeguarding and domestic abuse, at the end of March, we had 30 new safeguarding cases and 37 domestic abuse cases. On domestic abuse, we are going for DAHA accreditation towards the end of August. And that is an external accreditation by our company that will come in and assess how we approach domestic violence cases, how we manage it, how we record information in the system, the internal practices that we've got, with a view to try and get a silver source certification so that there's bronze, silver, and gold. So we're working towards that internally. On the voids, so the report goes through the number of total voids that we've got. Within the void numbers, I think it's worth confirming. So we've got the general need voids, but at the same time, we've got a number of voids that may not be a true void, so they're either awaiting stock disposal, so they're not likely to come back into use because of the level of investment needed, or we've got a large number of voids in Lancaster West where we're doing major works, and that type of work is taking the entire property back to brickwork. So that type of void work will always take a lot longer than the normal void that we expect to turn around within 28 days, or major works void, which is 56 days. And then finally, I think what you can see, members can see, is our tenant satisfaction measures, and it gives you an indicator of our performance over the last 3 years. What you can see is a year-on-year improvement against the TSM measures, but also it gives you a breakdown on how we compare with others within the sector in terms of quartile performance. I'm happy to take any questions on the housing needs question.
Okay, on the housing needs that you're not going to introduce. Can I just say something by way of background, because this is a new committee and I'm the only sort of original person who was on the old committee, apart from who's sitting at the back, is we did have the regulator came in and gave an assessment of us, which was below par, which was a C3, which we have to kind of address that. So we will come on to that. It's not on the agenda tonight. Everyone's been sent round the key decision, and so they are aware of the problem. And we will then find a way of how we're going to look at it on the work programme, and we'll take that later on. So do you want to take all of the questions together, or the housing needs as well?
If we cover housing management for now,
And then
we can go into.
Okay. So if we would take questions on housing management, who would like to start? Yeah.
Many of our residents' concerns are basically around communication rather than just about repairs itself. How are we ensuring that residents are receiving timely updates and throughout the repair process, and how is this communicated to them?
So that's a really interesting question, and I think it's worth distinguishing the responsive repairs that we do. And when you look at the figures, 90% of our responsive repair works get completed on first visit. And then when you look at the transactional survey that we do, around 85% of our residents are then satisfied with the quality of work. That's very different to the major works that we would do on the estate. And often that's planned investment work where we're doing external refurbishment to the block, whether it's new bathrooms, new kitchens, new windows, new roof. And part of the challenge is always going to be, because of the nature of the work that we do, it's always going to be quite intrusive. And whenever we do bathroom or kitchen work, I think when I speak to residents, the feedback I often get is, although they're happy the work's taking place, they'd like to be fully informed of the work schedule and coordination and where different trades are coming in. And I don't think we've always got that right as an organisation, and I've definitely spoken to our contractors around this. Part of the feedback I've got from contractors is whenever they go in and do, say, kitchens and bathrooms, they'll have like a 20 slot. And sometimes, they've got 20 that they want to do, but because of our trade availability or residents not being available, that 20 slot that needs to be reconfigured. So what then happens is it then impacts the work for the first 20 around what we may have communicated in the first place, and then how things get delayed. So the contractors are definitely looking at how they can improve the program of works and how that then aligns with the communication with residents. On our side, we've got, on the major work side, we've got resident engagement officers. His primary role is there to be the liaison between RVKC, the contractor, and the tenant. So there's definitely a bit that we can do to try and strengthen that communication. But there's also a bit that the contractor would need to do around keeping residents updated on when things take place. The other bit is around, before the works even start, being quite clear with residents, this is what the major works looks like on your particular ward or on your block or on your estate. How can you inform some of the choices that we make? So I know the last year and a half, whilst we've been doing kitchens and bathrooms, what we didn't want to do was install one type of kitchen and one type of bathroom. We wanted to give residents a choice. So we've got a social value manager who's been working part of the contract to work with contractors to give residents a choice of 3 bathrooms and a choice of 6 tiles, so they can try and configure the installation to their choice. And so again, we're trying to personalise it where we can within the budget constraints that we've got on delivering this programme.
And Laura,
So kind of following on from that, the repair completion time is above the target, but you did say there were improvements. That's good. But what are the main causes for delay? Is it contractor performance, or is there some internal process? Which is it? And also on that is how often are contractors' works checked? Because I hear a lot of residents very unhappy, dissatisfied with finished works which aren't actually finished. So that's quite interesting. And then one other question is really, no, let's start with that.
So when we look at the responsive repair side, 80% of the work that we do is actually carried out by internal DLO operatives, and we subcontract out 20%. And when we look at when we compare the satisfaction levels between how our contractors perform and how we perform, the satisfaction levels are a lot higher with our own immediate DLO team. So that's definitely, I think, point one. When we talk about some of the delays, often what we find is it's where it's more complex. And so just to give you an example, if someone reports their tap isn't working, that's fairly easy to go in and replace the tap and get that fixed. And you're more likely to get first-time resolution on that. It becomes more complex, for example, where you've got a leak from the resident above and the resident below is complaining about that leak. We need to be able to arrange access to the flat above. And once we've then got access, stop the leak, we then need to carry out the remedial works flat above. So someone will need to go in, make sure it's all dry, and then plaster and wait for that to dry before someone else can go in and then do painting work. So with those types of more complex work, it's not practically possible to get that fixed on site.
Okay, and then just to follow up on complaints, so what is the sort of how long do you think we will return to our target, and what are the steps you've put in place to ensure that doesn't happen again, to prevent happening in the future? Then
So there's a few things around complaints. One is looking at the total number of stage 1 complaints that we get, and then from the total number of complaints that we get, so on average we get just under 800 complaints within the housing management service a year on stage 1, and then a handful then get escalated to stage 2. Looking at the escalation between other things that we could have done in our response within stage 1 that would have prevented it being escalated to stage 2. And then within that, both whether it's a stage 1 or a stage 2 complaint, are there systemic sort of failures within the service that we need to be able to address? So what are the key themes coming over? Is it a particular part of the business that's consistently failing? Are there particular teams that we need to do more work on? So there's a wider piece around learning from complaints. I think the final bit is where residents are still not happy with the stage 2 response, where they escalate it to the housing ombudsman for that to be independently investigated, and often they would make a determination and would provide us feedback. And part of that is handling on the housing ombudsman determination. The second bit is, again, often they could identify sort of systemic issues for the organisation for us to take away and learn. So as a team, we do regularly look at the trends and look at our performance. In terms of how quickly we can recover from the backlog of works that we've got, we think by quarter 3, by sort of quarter 2, quarter 3, we'll be in a position to have cleared all of the backlog of work. Because when you look at the complaints and the position that we've got the backlog that we would have inherited from November that has now been assigned for that to be responded to the team. We've got new complaints coming through that needs to be managed and responded to within the allocated timelines. So we think we'll be in a stable position by probably September, October. One of the things I've been doing since I started in January, I've met with the housing ombudsman to explain our context, to explain the recovery plan, and as part of that conversation, what they have said is, prior to cyber attack, there hasn't been a significant concern to them around our quality of response or in systemic issues, unlike some of the other providers that they've had to work quite closely and intensely with across London.
Could I just interject there and say that on page 43, looking at the traffic lights, the stage 1 complaints are red, but they're red before the cyber attack. So there was obviously something going on before. I mean, except that cyber attack has caused a lot of problems, but they were already, by July 25, they're already in the red.
So our sort of timeline that we've got is to respond to any complaint that comes in within 10 days from the date of acknowledgement. So we have 5 days to acknowledge, and then on the date of acknowledgement, we've then got 10 days to provide a response. The internal matrix, the figures that you're referring to, in some ways, it's only given us 12 days, so it's given us 3 days less than what we would ordinarily have. That's been discussed internally around making sure that 15 days is clearly representative of those figures. So if we use the 15 days rather than the 12 days, it would have resulted in a better outcome. Having said that, our response time generally needs to improve anyway.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, thank you. The report is very thorough, I have to say, so many figures. But that's great. I'm delighted to hear that the outcome is, the UTB on target. So congratulations on that. The couple of things that I want to just talk to you about was, first, you talk about there's a system that you transfer from from one system to Netcore platform.
Yeah.
And you said that the access, the queries were answered, much better. So my question is Netcore a permanent system, or is there another? Are you migrating to something else post the cyber attack? My second question would be on the arrears, which you already slightly touched on.
Yeah.
But I would quite like to know, there's no mention of what percentage we're still expecting, how much is still in arrears. And because I know residents were very concerned, people who could read it, that all of a sudden we might be asking them to, pay for 6 months in advance, which they wouldn't be able to afford. So if you could address that. Page 26 on table 1, again, good figures, but the figures that slightly were disappointing were the residents are treated fairly and with respect. That's only, the change is only 3%. And I think this cultural change we've been addressing for quite a long time. So it was disappointing to see that figure. And even going back to the complaints handling as well, that the change has only been 160. And if you look at it annually, it's almost flat, because it had gone down the year before.
Yeah.
So that's my next one. On the voids, even though you touch it, but Chair, if I may refer to it during the housing needs, because I have some questions on the financials of how you calculate the voids. Do you want to answer that now or later?
On the voids?
Yeah.
So
I can ask you the question, I can ask you, but do you want to do it now or during housing?
I think we're
needs?
doing housing needs
Okay,
later.
sure.
Okay,
Sure.
And there were questions about it. And I would just add one thing I don't on this table that Pretty has drawn our attention to. It seems that you've got one in green on quite a few things which are quite low really in terms of percentage increase. So I don't understand the traffic light
Yes.
in that one.
So shall I answer your last question first? Or
Sure.
Yeah.
Whatever suits you.
So what the sort of traffic light system represents is how we perform when we compare ourselves to other London providers. And when we compare Hampton against each of those indicators, are we quartile 1, which is, one of the biggest, best providers in London have, or are we in quartile 4, which is one of the worst? So that's that. So we take our Hampton figure and compare that with other London providers, and that confirms if it's quartile 1, 2, or 3. One of the things, and you're right to pick out the overall approach to complaint handling, where although we've got 13.8% and we said 1, every single London or local authority is struggling with that particular indicator. So these questions are the same question that everyone in London is using and asking their residents, and then we're comparing the figures. So obviously, you know, we want this to be a lot higher, and we want it to be above the 6%. But there's definitely a piece of work that we need to do to improve the actual handling, and you're definitely right around trying to, you know, continue to improve the point around resident and respect and how we engage with residents. And as part of the work we've taken forward, we are looking at the resident engagement strategy and what are the different other ways to engage with residents so they feel quite involved in the way we're working going forward, how transparent we are. There's been quite clear about our improvement plan, how they can feed into it, how they can be a critical friend, and we use some of their insight into our service improvement work. On the point around Netcall and I think it's retail, so just before the cyber attack, this is the telephone system our contact centre in housing use, and that contact centre answers all calls in relation to repairs as well as resident services. So immediately after the cyber attack, Netcall wasn't working the way we wanted it to work, so we had to revert back to the old system for business continuity purpose. But Netcall is definitely the future platform that we're working towards, you know, getting up and running fully.
Thank you.
Billy and then Alex.
A couple of questions on. Could you go into a bit more detail on the stage 1 complaints? You said that you identified systematic failures and the themes that come through stage 1 complaints. Can you give any more detail on what those themes and sort of systematic issues are?
So part of it is, you know, a large proportion of the complaints that we get is in relation to often either repairs or major works, or some of the points that Councillor Hunt you've picked up around and you know, around the quality of works that we've got. So often whenever we do major works, residents do pick up things that haven't been done the right quality. It could be defects, and it could be snagging. Sometimes it is, you know, the work specification we've given to the contractor. So one of the things that we picked up was, so we would go and do, for example, a bathroom installation near a hallway, but the resident would like also the hallway to be painted. The contractor hasn't been given that specification to paint the hallway. Their specification is to go in and just install a new bathroom. When we looked at it, actually, you know, it's not going to actually cost us a lot of money to also, whilst we're at the property, to do the painting. So one of the things that we've now done is we've recruited directly an internal decorator. So rather than getting a contractor to do that piece of work, we've got internal, so additional staff who can do, you know, painting, you know, where we're doing major works, because I appreciate that when you go in, you repair a bathroom, there are dust that's created. So, you know, if we can do sort of decorative work where we can, that's definitely the plan. The other areas is more around the dependencies we often have with leaks. So leaks is a common issue that comes up quite a lot, and us trying to access properties. And going forward, us taking more of a approach to do forced entries where we're not getting feedback from residents, or they're just not engaging with us. Where, you know, at the moment where it's a major leak, we will go in and do a forced entry. But we don't, what we try and do is we try and work with residents for more minor leaks coming through.
Yeah.
So again, when you look at the data of our stock, it's really young. You know, it's not new build. The sort of third key thing that comes up is noise. You know, a lot of our properties don't have the right level of noise insulation, and it's not works that we would do. It's just the nature of the block that you live in. Often we find our team would go and investigate the noise levels. We have machines that record the output, and it's not meeting the threshold for us to carry out tenancy enforcement action. So that can also be challenging, and part of that is for us, how have we managed the complaint rather than the outcome which the resident may not be happy with, but we're quite restricted to what we can actually do in those scenarios.
And just to follow up, which is to do with the complaints and relate to all of that. I mean, the lowest figure on this, on the tracker is with handling. And I mean, it's disappointing across London, right, that you're still in the first percentile, yet it's still only at 30%. And do you think there's anything that you can, or that we can learn as a council with both the cyber attack, how that impacted the backlog, complaints backlog, how complaints are processed, that, and I guess how now we're recovering from it and how the systems you're implementing? Are there things that will be doing differently with the complaint process compared to before the cyber attack that maybe will help bring that figure up again?
So certainly one of the things I've done this week is I've kind of given this in my interest to make sure we recover as soon as possible. The team are working really hard. I mean, they're really stretched with the sort of volumes they've got. I've put in I will have by next week a weekly monitoring tracking system in place just to get more visibility around our handling side. The complaints function doesn't sit with housing management at the moment, but I'm working with the complaints service as well as the executive director to make sure there's joint oversight, because you can improve the handling, but also they're quite dependent on our housing team to get back to them with information in a timely way. So it is a collaborative piece of work that we're working through at the moment.
Thank you.
I had two quick questions. One of them is quite minor, but I was just interested from the responsive repairs figures. Is there a reason why before June 25 or July 25 there's not any figures for door entry calls? Because then there seemed to be kind of a lot after that, and I wondered if that was some new thing that was being monitored.
Page are you looking at?
Sorry, it's in the appendix.
That's 39.
Yeah, so it's just under the responsive repairs. I think it's page 41. Sorry.
The pages given in with the text.
Yeah.
And I never read the pages, page 41.
So it's reporting figures from July onwards.
Yeah, so I was just wondering if there were kind of no door entry calls before that, and if so, why there'd been kind of a spike. And also it was one of the figures that's seems to be the most have the most reds. So I was wondering if there were any particular issues with fixing door entry.
I can come back to clarification on that.
Okay, great. And yeah, just on the point where it seems to be one of the areas where it seems to be in red for more than some of the other types of responsive repairs. I wondered if you found that there were any challenges with doing door repairs kind of in a particularly timely fashion.
Not necessarily in my time, in our case in the last 5 months, predominantly the areas of repairs that have really stood out has been sort of lifts and lift breakdown, and also sort of windows. Those are the two common themes that have come up quite frequently. The door entry hasn't necessarily been a key theme that's landing on my desk as an area of concern. I can definitely come back to you with clarification on the zeros for May to June.
Great, thanks. And the other question I had was obviously the lowest area on the tenant satisfaction survey in terms of how we compare to other London boroughs is satisfaction with safety. But given the seems to be doing relatively well in terms of the actual mechanics of ensuring properties are fire safe, I wondered if you had any sort of, do you think that's kind of historic, or is there anything that kind of comes up in the data?
No, so we've just had the 25-26 tier zones back, and I'm happy to confirm on that particular indicator on satisfaction that your home is safe to live in, we have seen a increase for 25-26. So although it would have been sort of quartile 3 when you compare us with everyone else for last year, that's one of the areas that the satisfaction levels have gone up, and we definitely share the TSM data for 25-26 once we've submitted it as part of our annual return with the committee as well. So you can see the latest update on that. But again, generally, it is a continued year-on-year improvement. I think it increased by around 4%, but I'll confirm and check as well.
Thank you. So I think we'll move on now to housing needs if there are no more questions on housing management. Oh, sorry,
Thank you, Chair.
Claire.
I just have a couple of points, if I may, just very quickly. First of all, as regards to the Ombudsman, my understanding is that we are meeting with the Ombudsman monthly. It's not just a one-off meeting. It's going to be, has been, and is going to be a monthly meeting along the journey to compliance. Is that correct?
So I meet with the regulator of social housing
Yes.
once a month.
Sorry, I'm regulated.
Yes, yes. And I suppose that goes back to the question, Chair, you asked around our inspection and the work we've done since. So I've been meeting with the regulator once a month since January, since I started. And as part of that work, we've been reporting on the key areas of performance internally, as well as our long-term strategy to address the areas of the inspection outcome. And last week, a report went to leadership, which was a housing improvement plan. Prior to going to leadership, I had an external organisation that worked with local authorities on improvement to review it. They provided us their feedback. I also shared a draft copy of that plan with the regulator, and they gave an initial view before it was approved at leadership last week. So that plan itself, one of the things that we have committed to is both scrutiny and leadership will get frequent updates on how we're progressing against that plan. At the same token, those monthly meetings I used to have with the regulator, they're now bi-monthly meetings. So there's less engagement than it was probably last year.
Great, thank you. And also on the approach to complaints handling, which is quite a low satisfaction rate. I wondered if there's any work or sort of concentration, if you like, on how the handling is actually happening, not so much what's driving the complaints in terms of systemic issues. But I think at a previous meeting, it was asked what might be the barrier to improving the first stage 1 responses. And it was wondered whether there might be some level of defensiveness or the quality of the comms could be improved. And I wondered if there's been any work going on around that since then.
My sort of view on the handling is you can definitely improve the handling and the resident experience, and from the point the resident makes a complaint to us responding, and even if there's a delay on our side internally, keeping the resident updated that we've got your inquiry, it's been assigned to the relevant team. We may not respond within 10 working days. We need a bit more to keep the resident informed. And that bit of the handling, I think, is something that we can do internally. The difficulty is often where, as an organisation, we communicate an outcome that the resident may not necessarily be happy with, but internally, we've tried to manage our expectation. And often what you find is some of those complaints may escalate to stage 2 and up to the Ombudsman, and the Ombudsman will then find no fault on our part. Sometimes, yes, absolutely. There are times where we do get it wrong, both at stage 1, both at stage 2, and the Ombudsman make a determination that highlight where we have got it wrong.
I mean, anyone who deals with complaints regularly as their work will know how important it is in the first response not to compound whatever's driven the complaint.
Yes.
And what I'm seeing and others are seeing in their casework is some responses that kind of make it worse, and the person is more upset by the response to the complaint than by the thing that drove it in the first place.
Yeah.
I think that is the piece that's coming perhaps from defensiveness or from not fully understanding what's driven it. And just as an example, when we talk about why contractors don't turn up, for instance, with sort of major works, huge problem. Not so much a problem of access. And yet we historically as a council have, I think, too often sort of tried to make it be it's a resident problem. Oh, it wasn't done because we couldn't get access, or it wasn't done because there's damp and mold because residents didn't open their windows. And that sort of defensiveness, I think, is a thing that could be quite easily a quick win to change to improve what that first stage 1 response might be.
Absolutely. I think there are a number of areas, even on stage 1, where we can avoid it going to stage 2. And repairs is a really good one, where if a resident complained about a repair not being done, if we at stage 1 just got the repair done, there's no need for it to escalate to stage 2.
Yeah.
This is where we're trying to defend a position that shouldn't be defended.
Exactly.
Exactly. Having said that, there are internal challenges as well on genuine cases of access, where, you know, and one of the things that I look for whenever I have parts of the business saying we've not had any access, is the evidence that sits behind it. So if we've logged a repair that needs to be done, what I would expect within the system is a clear record of when did we go out to visit, did we, you know, card the property, how we got the picture, does our GPS confirm that it was attended to, as opposed to just taking the internal sort of record for it. And we do have that technology in place to confirm that as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, so I think, okay, if you can be quick there, Samia, because we need to move on to housing needs now.
Very first of all, Madam Chair, congratulations on your appointment.
Thank you.
Just wanted on record that the departure of Councillor Simmons is a great loss. I think she was a great advocate for social housing, and it's inexplicable that she's not part of this committee. But really briefly, I'm not going to talk about the paper sent. I think the questions that the members of the committee have had are very valid questions, because the key performance indicators are not complete enough. And in that paper, there's 15 additional that would ensure that you tease out this information. And when Jared, you compare with other local authority, we are not any boroughs. There are obligations from the public inquiry, but also that C3. So I wanted to suggest that perhaps there could be work between the TCC and housing management to have an annex and come back with those key performance indicators that we believe will give you a truer pictures of what the issues are, and then we can work on improving. So that's my recommendation.
Okay.
And I'll circulate that paper.
Thank you, Samia. You would like to ask a question?
Very
as well?
quickly, lovely to meet you. I'm sorry I haven't had the opportunity. I'm Mimi, and I am the vice chair of the Wales End Resident Association. I am only speaking because you touched on the development of resident engagement strategy, which is a huge issue and has been a huge issue in the borough and the council. Since Grenfell, there's been minimal really change in terms of the culture, despite the fact that there's been quite a lot of moving around, chopping and changing, but actually people's attitudes are fairly consistent as before. And just to highlight that issue, yesterday at the Wales End, we had a works, it was advertised as a community meeting. When we got there, there was like a market stall kind of setting, and the lady, Natalie initially, when the residents were saying, this is not what we expected, this is not how we have come to an agreement that we're going to run these meetings. She was extremely resistant. At one point, she said, well, we'll think about it for next time. Luckily, Laura and Hina came along and really ensured that we had that space to speak with. And so just with that tiny, tinchy, winny example, I think developing a residential engagement strategy is going to be very difficult without the residents. Traditionally, when we've done any co-production, co-design, anything like that, it doesn't really it's always a step removed from the actual residents. And at the end of it, what then is the final product is often nowhere near what was agreed we were going to aim for to begin with. So there's been a recent code of practice in terms of engaging with the, is it participation charter? Yes, I've read that, we've had that, but it has no teeth. How are you going to have, you know, these things are great, but there's no teeth to these things, which then ends up with officers thinking that they know what we need without listening to us, or they sit there, nod their head, and then go carry on as usual. And so how do we change this?
Could you, address how we can improve our engagement strategy with residents?
At the moment, and I fully accept the points you've raised. When we look at TTC, it's a really useful sort of forum to hear directly from residents. Officers go along, get feedback, provide updates. What I'm quite keen to do is, whilst we've got various resident activities taking place, the key question we need to be asking internally is, how is that shaping or changing the way we work? So one of the pieces of work I've certainly valued in the 5 months I've been here is a piece of work a few dedicated residents did on our repair service and a deep dive. That actually came along to this scrutiny where residents talked about the work they did in reviewing the repairs operation. They used their lived insight into making recommendations. In some areas we didn't agree with the recommendations, in a number of areas that we did. And part of that work is then now implementing the areas that we have agreed on. Because the reality is, you know your property and neighbourhood and estate better than anyone else. So how do we use your lived experience to improve the service delivery? Whilst it's useful to be able to improve and get feedback, how do we capture that feedback in a way where we can clearly demonstrate, look, this is what you said and this is what we've delivered. I don't think we've always got that right, and there's definitely room for improvement. So part of this is going to be focusing on giving it that teeth.
I think that one of the big problems, and the reason that I'm here today, and I actually came out of my bed to get myself here, because I'm not very well, is the fact that what you say is absolutely right, I agree. But if we were doing it right, then we wouldn't be having this conversation. And part of the issue is the fact that not the lack of representation, certainly for me. I live in Chelsea, south of the borough, and we don't really have representation, as it were, and it's very difficult and has been very difficult. We've now got councillors that are been newly elected, but previously we've had serious issues with getting things done with repairs, with everything else. And so as much as you say that you're going to work with us, I think there needs to be a huge effort to ensure that whoever comes to take part in your groups, that you do get a cross section and that you do include south of the borough, because we don't even get a mention in the Housing Matters magazine. We never get that. We're constantly being told about how things are being done in the north and how that's going to be implemented in the south, and basically told shut down when we're saying that's great for the north, but maybe this doesn't work for us in the south. Can we talk about this? Can we do this? And then people turn around and say, well, my vision for this is, I'm sorry, but your vision doesn't matter. My vision and our vision, that's what matters.
So can we take this as a recommendation?
Absolutely.
From the committee that we would like to look into community engagement, residents engagement strategy? We need to have a good look about what's going on.
Yes.
Specifically in World's End, sorry, in World's End, it's really important that someone start looking at what's happening in World's End. People don't feel they've got a voice, and I think they can't be left out.
And also, Chair, just quickly, it's not just residents' lived experience that is of value to the council.
Yeah.
We also have residents, as you'll see if you read this paper, which I've had a quick skim of, we have residents who are incredibly skilled professionally in what they do. And the repairs report was an example that came from the TCC. We had experts writing that report, and there is real value in those recommendations that I think we must not forget, especially in terms of culture.
Thank you, Claire. So moving on then to the housing needs section of this report. I've got two questions. The first is about temporary accommodation. It is going down, but what have we got in place? How are we going to drive it down further? Have we got plans that we can, because obviously the temporary accommodation is costing the council an awful lot of money. And then the other thing is just clarification on page 27, 6.29. It says the 10K weekly target for the voids. Is that 10,000 that you're not getting, or 10,000 that it's costing you, or?
Sure. I should also say, this is not my area, so.
I know, it's
I'm not
you're standing in, okay,
but I am standing in, so I'll try and answer the sort of questions to the best of my ability. So on the 10K, I actually did manage to speak to Plato to cover this. So when we look at void, ordinarily we've been looking at the turnaround rate. So how quickly are we turning around these void units? Is it 25 days or is it 50 days? On the housing needs side, the way they measure it is how much is it costing them by that project being void. So that's where you get the 10,000 and the actual was 8,500. Code is quite key actually going forward. We look at the turnaround rate rather than the monetary value, because that is, you know, that's where you know.
So is the 10K the value of all the empty voids?
Just the one.
One void
Yeah.
is costing 10,000 a week.
Yes, and so depending on the sort of comparison you make. So if you've got, you know, a 4-bedroom, for example, and it's on 9 there, it could be a range of indicators. So they don't really have that many voids. When you have to look at the conformance matrix, I think they've got 5 voids at the moment, but the indicators they're using are the financial one as opposed to the turnaround one.
Okay, all right. And temporary accommodation, do you know what we're going to do to drive it down further? So something we can do?
So part of the challenge, certainly on the housing needs side, is the lack of supply. So the housing needs side is a range of accommodation. So you've got bed and breakfast, nightly lets, PSLs, and then our own properties. And one of the strategies by the housing needs team is to try and reduce the most expensive form of accommodation, which is often B&Bs, nightly lets, as well as some of the properties that we're securing from other landlords at a really high rate. One of the initiatives the team have been working on is us acquiring more properties, utilising the pension fund, and in return, the pension fund gets a return back for that investment. So team have done one acquisition in Stratford. They're looking at more, and the strategy there would be to then look at our most expensive accommodation units we've got at the moment, where we acquire our own properties, transfer the residents from those expensive units to more sort of affordable units that we manage directly.
I'll go this side of the table. Alex, do you have any questions, or Billy?
On temporary accommodation, do you know what the policy is on buybacks and whether or not they're being used specifically for temporary accommodation? I'm trying to bring that up.
So we are looking at, we've got some funding, and we're looking at using some of that funding to target particular wards where you've got potentially leaseholders, where we're going to do major works, and those major works might be quite excessive in value, and whether they'd be interested in selling those properties to us, which we can then use for TA properties. So that's at the early stages of the development. So we, I think what we're trying to ascertain at this stage is the amount of money that's confirmed, the funding that we've got across the next 5 years, where we're going to be doing major works. where some of those individual recharges are quite significant, and the leaseholders would be probably quite tempted rather than pay for the major works, sell the property to us, which we can then use for TA purposes.
Alex, do you want those questions?
No, I'm okay.
Okay, Laura, and then Pretty.
Thank you. Just two questions. The first really is on the chart thing. It says other outcomes. What does that mean when it with housing needs? What would that possibly mean? Other outcomes. So
Relief. Housing relief. Homelessness relief and homelessness.
Which page are you on?
Yeah, so
Laura?
I'm on like 33 and 32. So 33 in fact. But what are the other, and in fact, no, 31 and 32. So yeah, what does that mean, other outcomes? On the, if you look at page 31, number of provisional successful, unsuccessful, other outcomes, what does that mean?
I will just come back to you on that, with the definition of what the other outcomes mean.
Yes.
So ordinarily, you've got the relief within the 56 days where we make an assessment to then decide whether we provide main duty or not.
Yeah.
And sometimes there may be other outcomes agreed with the resident. So be either discharged to the sort of PSL side. But let me find out and confirm because I wouldn't want to give you the wrong information.
Okay, and then my other question is sort of B&Bs have gone down, so bed and breakfast families. What is the sort of strategy to ensure that it doesn't fall into that risk again, to keep them moving that way up into, you know, secure housing and so forth, rather than falling back into homelessness or
So I think by sort of definition and by law, family should be in a B&B for no more than 6 weeks.
Yes.
Again, this is an indicator I think a lot of landlords in London have struggled with because of a lack of supply in the property, and often what you find is different local authorities are competing for the same pool of properties, which makes it a lot more harder. So the key strategy for the team in the Coaches area has been to try and make it more attractive, to try and get more private landlords to lease us their property over a longer term, so incentivising that. The other bit was the bit I mentioned around acquisition using the pension fund. So the more property we have, the less of a dependency we have to put families in B&Bs.
Madam Chair. Chair, I just want to go back to the question that the chair raised about the voids, just to clarify. Even if you look at the average, let's say you said the minor voids are 49 and major are 59. So let's say we're talking around, 40 or 50 houses. If it's 10,000 per week per void, if that is correct, on page 44, it's saying on the chart that we've got 202 empty homes that have been empty for 48.68 days. That's quite a shocking figure.
No,
So am I misunderstanding something there?
yes. So you got the voids within the general needs unit that we manage,
Right,
and that's measured on how quickly we can turn it around on 28 days or 56 for major voids. And then you've got the voids on Kojo's side, which is based on the financial loss per week. So Kojo's got 5 voids for that week. How much is it costing Kojo in terms of the financial savings?
so that's 50,000 times 5.
I think what we need to do, Pretty, is to write to Kojo and ask him for
Yes,
clarification
but I think
of,
that's right.
of a note of exactly, because it doesn't make sense to me that one void, well, I wouldn't pay £10,000 a week
No.
for a flat.
So it could, I think he's got, if we look at the indicator, he's got 5 boys for that week. For that week, I think the way they've calculated it would be the weekly loss would be 10,000.
Okay.
Yeah,
So that's very different to
Yeah,
the other
yes.
void
that's
on
exactly,
the general needs side.
no, but that's exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah,
But I think we'll get, so we get clarification from Kojo on that point,
Yeah,
because it's not really.
no, that's true. One, Chair, I'll be very quick. The other thing as well, in the properties that we have, it would be quite nice to, on page 45, it would be helpful to have, how many properties are for sale. Because I mean, it could slightly distort the figure. Hold on to the 45.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, so how many have been identified for disposal?
Yes, and so, because we were saying total running two, so how many are for sale?
Yeah.
That's a check, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Christian. Ina.
My question would be again revolving around residents. As in, are we also measuring residents' experience of temporary accommodation, particularly around communication and support while they are waiting for permanent housing solutions?
I will come back to your clarification on the transactional surveys that's been used on the housing needs side.
Thank you. Alex.
Just to add one other question, if we're this is something maybe we'd also want Kojo to expand on, but just in the point about empty homes, it would be good to get a sense of the reasons behind the increased length of time that it's taking to relet, particularly where there are minor works, other works becoming more complicated than they were initially thought to be. And also I gather that this is an average. So I'd be interested to know what the kind of range is as well, if there are any properties that are kind of perennially empty, because that's something we hear in casework.
Yeah, no, I would imagine the higher number of voids you've got, the average will go up. So project can come back and confirm. Yeah.
Okay. So, Joe, thank you very much. Okay, we'll take one question from Claire.
Would the committee like to see KPIs in the future about overcrowding, given that that's such a significant issue for so many of our residents? And that's maybe a question for Kojo.
Okay, overcrowding. We have a narrow definition of what is overcrowding. Yeah, there again, I think it's something that we'll have to raise with the Kojo. Okay.
Could I ask a question probably for Kojo to come back on? There is a house in Edith Grove, Chelsea. It's been valued at £5 million. It was left derelict for years. It's recently been refurbished. It stands empty. And it would be really good to know what's going to happen to that house.
Yeah.
Why people aren't being housed in it already. Yeah, so I don't know if you can answer that, but definitely.
Thank you.
So one last very quick, very quickly, I think it applies to all local authorities. For debt costs, it's an issue, and local authorities are required when offering temporary accommodations to ensure there's enough space for a family to put a bed cot. We run the baby bank, and families in temporary accommodation are given spaces with no furniture and too small for a baby to have a safe space to sleep. So I think that's really important for you as a committee to make sure what is it that you can do to make sure that those families you place in temporary accommodations have a safe, have the means to have that baby, an innocent baby, to have enough decent space to sleep on a cot. So it's a requirement, and that's been updated in the homelessness code of practice. So there's an obligation to really.
So we can ask a question around that as well. Okay. As long as I've written it down, but you've written it down as well. So okay. So thank you very much, Jared. And I think we'll now move on to agenda item A5. Yeah, it's the communities.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you. So, Sarah, welcome. Thank you for sitting in the back. Cheap seats. So, yeah, cheap seats. So, who is going to
Yeah.
introduce it, and then I can, yeah, but that's been to be done.
So I'm going to take it as you've all read the report. I think there's just a few things I'd like to highlight. The first one is that for the first time, we're reporting on the demographic makeup of the residents accessing the organisations and the NSSF. And I think if you go to page 52, I think it shows very clearly the number of people accessing, which is over 60,000. And then on the next page, we have the development project fund. And then after that, city living. So I think it gives you a very clear picture of what we're doing.
So Moya, would you like to say something?
No, I think that we have been to scrutiny with this report previously. In 2025, there was less opportunity for us to bring this report to scrutiny, but this is the annual report. We hope to do this more regularly. So it will be very helpful to get your feedback. If the report doesn't include all the indicators we'd like to see, because it has grown over the years since we've been bringing it each meeting, saying there's something you want to add in terms of indicators. So if there's anything you want to see with regards to those two areas of work across my 5 teams within my department, then I'm happy to look into including that. The report that we brought previously were quarterly, and we included, you said we did, but because it's annual, it's not appropriate to include that as one of the measures because there'll be so many to include. But we do have a chart that shows how many, what percentage of consultations did have, like you said, we did. Okay, cool.
So thank you. I'm going to start with questions something I've written. I'm really glad that you're doing demographics, but on the first page, page 52, I do not understand. When you've got 93% of Black British, is that of the people? Is it of the 52, or what is it of? Because it really, I did it various different ways. 145 people in the borough. I mean, even 93% of 52 doesn't quite work. So, what is that 93%?
So that's 93% of the data we received from the BCS organization. So that's not necessarily the 52. So it's the information that we received from those who are providing that those services, but we can put figures against them.
Okay.
Rather than just percentages.
So even, sorry, I thought it might be something like that, but even still, it does seem to me there are too many Black people compared with Asian or, it just seems a bit wrong.
Yes, that's absolutely. Again, also the point that this is representative of how people identify themselves. I'll go back and I will double check to make sure those figures are correct.
Okay.
Because I did ask and they did say they were correct, but I will double check again.
All right. Start with Ruchi then.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, continuation of the same question as the Chair. Does this figure also include residents of Arabic or Minna heritage?
It should include as well, but there isn't. Normally, that would be under other ethnic group if that is the way they choose to identify themselves.
Right.
And as we have here, it says 2%. And it may be the case that, as I said, it's how they identify themselves, but that's the information that we have, 2%.
Right. And what do you identify as other ethnic group? What is that?
That does include, it depends on, as I said, how people identify themselves. It could be Greek, people of Greek background. It could be people from possibly Arab background. So,
so from the major.
Yes, and in terms of Black and Black British, sometimes when people identify as African, they're included amongst Black. So yes, but I can break that down just and get more information about exactly which groups are comprising the different key headlines in terms of ethnicity.
And I think, as has been mentioned already, I think it would help, it's a bit unclear.
Yeah, and it's we don't have the 100 here. We can't see that.
Exactly.
Because a lot of people don't declare.
Yes.
So it's.
Yeah, it's like, we don't want to say, might be a lot of people, they don't want to say. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Sorry, Chair.
All right.
Page 56. Please forgive my ignorance, But I'm a bit confused by the last 3 points in your table. Value of income, value of benefits. How is this quantified? If you look at the table on page 56.
Yeah. So when they provide advice in terms of benefits and income, we quantify that. So the benefits and income that people receive because they sought that advice, that's what that indicates.
Is it in actual terms? Or
It's a quantifiable figure. Following advice that's been provided by one of the partners in the Pennington Chelsea Advice Partnership. That's the figure that is amalgamated, and that's what we have here. So it could include housing benefits, unemployment benefits, child tax credits. It's not just necessarily for those who are employed, so people that are working as well. So it's just a combination of all the different benefits that people have received or income that they have maximized through the advice that they've received from the Advice Partnership.
So when you talk about the debt that's written off, the target was 245. It's below target.
Yes.
So that means it's a positive for us.
No, this is not a positive.
So
Because we want to get more debt written off through the Advice Partnership, and we didn't achieve that. We only achieved 80% of the target that we wanted to be written off.
right, okay. And why was that, do you know?
I could go back and double check with the partnership to get the full details of why that was.
And just final observation, Jeff. The other thing on the data I would really like is some sort of benchmarking, and not only that, given the constraints, financial constraints we are facing, is how impactful our services are, because we want to continue with the services that help our community. I mean, it is so important, the cohesion, the community, all that. So we don't want to unnecessarily take off services, but if you don't have the data that proves how impactful these services are, it would be better to have less services, like reaching out, bigger outreach and more impact than having so many where they're not utilized. Something like that would be quite helpful.
We could do that for the grants that we have, responsibility for. So Vulnerable Sector Support Fund, Grenfell Projects Fund, and we are doing a lot of work with the providers around impact and how they measure impact. Is there any particular indicators for impact that you would like to see? Because some are quantifiable, some aren't, some may be qualitative, but that relies specifically on what the providers are telling us. Is there a particular type of impact reporting you'd like to see?
I'd be very interested, Chair, if I may, on the qualitative one, because quantitative, you can quantify it. There's maths, simple maths, so it's okay. But the qualitative, I think we need to be quite scrutinize it properly and just make sure that it's being fully utilized. So the qualitative ones would be very helpful.
You have provided some qualitative, but we can provide more, go into more detail. We've been quite high level with the qualitative in terms of what the impact has been. But yes, you can definitely expand on that.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Brilliant. No,
Thanks for coming along. You were asking about what additional measures we might want to have on this report. Would we be able to have the sort of total amount that's in the fund and how it's spent, and just more detail on that? So specifically on the size of the organisations that have been funded in the past. I know that there's going to be changes to this fund, and exactly as Preeta was saying, thinking about impact and what the strategy is for the fund,
I think
which is going to be a later part of it.
I think that this is like a general overview of the department.
Okay.
We're coming on specifically to the voluntary sector fund, which I think
Later on.
yeah,
I'll save it for that.
just to stop you
Yeah.
there. No questions?
Sorry, I mean, will Grenfell Projects Fund also be in that bit later on?
No, Grenfell Projects Fund is separate.
Okay.
And we normally come back to scrutiny the report on Grenfell Projects Fund as a separate item. So there's some information about it here, but it's very, very, very high level. Yeah.
So just similarly, any information you can on the monetary values of funding that's ordered through that would be helpful.
I had a question on the CLLL.
Yeah.
Is that relevant for this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just wondering from looking through it ward by ward, obviously there's huge differences in the amount spent in each ward. With the wards that have particularly low spends, I was curious if that was because there weren't many applications in those, like, is it the case that some wards are kind of highly competitive and you know, are only just maximize, you know, and struggling to meet everybody's needs while other wards kind of have their budget left unspent. So yeah, I was curious if that was about because of the applications weren't good quality enough, or if it was lack of interest.
So we'll have to take that away, but I think there has been a lack of interest, but also over the years, there's been councillors who can't agree with each other. And that does impact.
Sure.
I'm not saying that that's what's here right now, but I know in the past that has been a real issue.
Yeah, and also in some wards, there aren't that many community organisations that you know could
Couldn't
apply.
my ward, so then we give it all to the same one, which we're not supposed to, but
You don't give.
so, yeah, so CLL, I was just going to say that we have to kind of justify what we're spending the money on. And like in my ward, we have a limited number of organisations or things that we can actually spend money on. So I think, yeah, you have to justify it at the end of the day. It's not.
Because we've had businesses apply, which obviously we don't on businesses.
It's not very well.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just on the CLLL,
Yeah.
as some of you will know, there was recently a review of the CLLL, I think in 2023. And one of the things that was considered, because Alex made a really important point there, was whether CLLL should be, the ward budgets should be allocated according to need. And what we have, which hasn't been mentioned in answer to your question, is that some wards are in a position where they're able to spend their CLLL ward budget on things like flower planters or horse troughs, and other wards are inundated with applications for things like food provision and support. So there is a real variation in need. It's not reflected here, but there is a real variation in need across wards. So when they decided to not roll over unspent CLLL, one ward spent £40,000 on a party. Other wards can't afford to do that because the volume of applications for really important things, supported children, preventing knife crime, all things like that, just not needed or not applied for in other wards. So I think it's really important for everybody to understand.
Yeah, Sarah could perhaps say something about that, but I think I don't think there are any plans to sort of give different wards.
No, I'm not
different
suggesting
amounts
that.
of
I'm just
money. I
making
don't
the
think
point that
that's-
there is a huge variation in need
Yes, but
across
no
wards
one's-
because we are
yeah.
one of the most unequal boroughs in the nation. That was a very brief point, but the point I wanted to make as the Nottingdale councillor is in relation to the Grenfell Project Fund Round 4. I'm concerned that we are supporting 60% of that budget is going for one demographic. So given how limited and insufficient the overall budget has always been for the whole entire Grenfell community, given the needs assessment that we've seen, the JSNA and the refresh and all of that, I'm really surprised and concerned that there is such a focus on one demographic, when actually if you look at
What page? Which page are you on?
page 53. When you look at who has been affected and how, and the impacts on people's lives, yes, children and young people are really important, but how is it decided to distribute and allocate the fund in that way? Because I find that quite troubling. And equally, around where we have the again the ethnicity, I would want to be sure that we are actually distributing it fairly, because we're supposed to be a fairer council. We have people suffering, we have secondary deaths in the cohort, and I'm just really concerned this is the final piece of Grenfell recovery.
So perhaps you'd like to say something about the Grenfell fund or
So I
more?
can respond on that. The fund is distributed because we went to a public vote and residents chose those projects. And as you were chair of the scrutiny at the time, and it was very much down to the public, which
partly the public and partly the due diligence of the council in terms of gatekeeping those responses that went to the public vote. So it is a mix, because I know I've had conversations with Sue Harris about this and about how the maths didn't turn up.
This is, Sue Harris was not part of the
this is-
council. This is after Sue Harris.
I'm referring to a discussion that I had about how the scores on the public vote did not match, did not correlate mathematically with the outcome of the decisions. So that's how the response from Sue Harris eventually came, which is the due diligence that the council does prior. So I would need to see, well, which things came through, because similarly in round one, it was majoritively a huge amount of oversubscription for health and wellbeing. So I would like to know a little bit more about that as the ward council, and I may come to you for that.
Is it, so are we talking about round 4? Because I know it's round 2 and 3.
Well,
Definitely.
round four has raised a new concern for me, but I think it's always been problematic.
Well,
And I'm just really surprised to see such a weighting.
but as I said, that is the due diligence that happens beforehand. Are things like, does this organisation have, you know, a lot of debt against it? Are they eligible for the
Due
fund?
diligence is,
So if they're
I know
not
what it
eligible
is.
for the fund,
I know
they're
what
not going
that
to
is,
go
thank
through.
you.
So that is the reason why. So, but ultimately, as I've said, it is the public vote. This is what residents voted for.
I think
Actually,
perhaps,
on
I
that
think I need to
point,
come back to you.
Samia's organisation is
I
one
was
of the
gonna,
beneficiaries.
can I just come in?
Yeah.
Really quickly, if you go to page 53, it says 700 residents engaged. I think what we'd like to see, there's 14 organizations, the space is one of them. I'm looking at our interim report, we have 330 unique residents, so half of them came from us. So I think to have a bigger picture of who does what and the quality of it. And I'm going to insist because the space is run by 100% by residents from Kensington and Chelsea, and I've seen them work so hard on this. So I think we need to show between providers also the social return on investment. I think that's one of the things that you want asking, and we will be in a position to show what £1 of investment has created in our community. But we need that. We need all the providers to be able to do that, because looking at that, if there's 14 providers and half of the residents are by us for the same amount of money, then another, it doesn't make sense. I'm sorry to say, and we are residents first, is our taxpayer money, and we've over delivered, which means it's possible, but we want all providers for the same amount of money to be able to do the same thing, because at the end of the day, it's taxpayer money. That's my point. I just want this to be, we really need to tell the committee provider by providers, because they need to be able to see how the investment has yielded public benefit. So that's my recommendation.
You're absolutely right. The issue we have here is the report back. And we do have challenges around getting the providers provide information. So this is the information that we received, not necessarily.
So lessons
yes.
to learn for the VSSF, because we work hard. We do not charge you for the monitoring. And I see the girls at the space spending their free time to make sure they have all the data, and the quality of the data, demographics, that comes from us.
Yes.
So we want the other providers, if they want the funding from you, they need to be able to produce monitoring report and not say, oh, we can't do it.
So one of the challenges has been about using Clint.
And we
Yeah, there you go.
and we are definitely saying this time around, we're going to be very, very strict on monitoring. That is one of the key areas that we are going to be trying to be a lot more robust, because we really need that information. As you said, in terms of impact, in terms of understanding who's using the service, in terms of understanding the reach of the Vulnerable Sector Support Fund and the next round of Grenfell Projects Fund. So that's definitely something that we're looking at.
Because
So
we're not
it's in
after
that.
funding, but it's our money, and we want the best providers to be able, I'd be happy for all of them to be funded, so long as they show where our taxpayer money goes, and our residents, our neighbours, get the service. As simple as that.
And for the purpose of this paper, I just think this page 53 is inadequate to enable the scrutiny committee to properly
I
scrutinise what's
think
going on.
we can ask for more detail as we have in other places on the report.
This is the annual, so quarterly report.
Yeah, so it could be more detailed. So yeah, do other members of the committee have anything further to ask? Okay. Right, so we'll move on now to the next report, which is the VSSF.
think it's a very short report.
It's a very short.
Yeah,
Right.
I've really read it.
Can I just say something to start? We had another paper in on the 27th of January.
That's right.
Where we addressed the fact that the funding was being and we had different ways of perhaps doing it. This has been sent round to everyone in the committee because they're all new to the committee, so they need to understand the background, because this paper talks about the process. It doesn't really talk about the decisions that have been made. I understand there might be some sensitivity. You can't say who's getting what kind of thing right now. But yeah, if you could kind of give a bit of background, but everyone has better sent round the previous report to everyone so they see it.
Thank you, Chair. I think that's really helpful. So I think where we are now is that organisations had to submit their expressions of interest, and those are currently going through due diligence. And we will then look at, sorry, later this month, the timeline's in here, sorry.
Yes, so the, what the process is, as we mentioned, is the expression of interest first. And we received 55 expressions of interest, then we'll go through those. And then we will invite a smaller number. There'll be an assessment, a robust assessment, everything being recorded for audit. Then we'll invite a smaller number to go through a full, to submit a full application. And then there'll be another assessment process, and then the decision will be made. At this point, no decisions have been made. That's why there's no information.
In terms of my understanding from the last time is that we were thinking about actually funding fewer charities.
Yeah.
So I just wondered, do you know the amount that we've lost, or the amount, the full amount that we've got now to give for BSF? Do you have the kind of overhead figures? And then, yeah, to say, are we just going to fewer charities with more core funding for 3 years kind of thing?
It was that not in that? What's in the previous paper? I can't remember.
Yeah, it was in the previous paper.
It was in there.
I don't know, I've read so much today. Yeah, I read it somewhere. We wanted to,
So we are going to fund less organisations, but with more money,
okay,
I think is the easiest way of putting it, so that they really can be sustainable. Because I think at the moment there's a lot of organisations which are really not sustainable. And some of those are going to have to talk to each other and talk about amalgamating. And some will not. And it's going to be really tough. But if I put it into perspective, in the borough there's over 600 voluntary organisations. We currently fund 29, and that's going to be reduced. Yeah. So actually we're funding a very small number. What's really important is the ones that we do fund really look at tackling deprivation, and that we make them sustainable. Not make them, we don't make them. They become sustainable because we can't afford them to fall over.
Nora.
Just on that, you did mention the scoring system. How do you ensure that smaller community organisations aren't sort of disadvantaged by the larger, more established ones, especially if you're cutting them down or you're trying to get to?
So there is the small grants, which will go out through the Kensington and Chelsea Foundation, and that's particularly targeted at those smaller organisations.
Yeah, and it's exclusive for them. They're not competing against larger organisations. And unlike the main grant, which is going to be tapered down, we're maintaining the same amount across the 3 years for the small grants.
Very briefly, yes, I definitely confirm what echo the chair's sentiment. It'd be quite nice to know what the total figure is. If it's been reduced, what's been reduced, what institutions and charities are dropping by.
Well, we don't know.
We don't know yet.
So until we've got through until they've been scored and then they go through, they can then come back and submit their application. At the moment, we've had all these applications, but we don't know who's going to get the awards. And this is all done blind. All the due diligence is done blind. So the officers looking at this don't know whether it's Samir's organisation or the social council or the volunteer centre, whoever it is. It's all done,
Do you have the figure now of the overall amount you've got? Do you know, or has that been set?
It has been set. I can't 100% remember. I think it is 1.2 million.
No.
Is it, things like 1.1 or 1.2 million? Because it
I think
includes-
I read it in the, I think you might be right.
because it includes the public health funding as well. But that tapers down over the 3 years.
So we start at one point and then it reduces over 3 years.
Because we could have just done the final reduction in one go and then have the lesser amount over 3 years. But we thought it'd be better to not have
Graduate
it
it.
and kind of taper it down.
And that's what the organisations told
Yeah,
us, that
that's
for
what they
them
asked
it was better if it started there and gradually went down rather than taking the hit at the beginning.
And Chair, just one more.
Okay.
Do we encourage, given the time, we will be encouraging all these charities to say if they can slightly try and do fundraising events, if they can, just to enhance.
So this is the whole point, is that they should be able to match funds.
Yeah, right, okay.
So I'm going to use the Young KNC as an example. They get funding, but they also match funds, and they bring in a lot of funding from other organisations, like John Lyons in particular. And so I think what we found over the years is that some organisations just take the grants from the council and then don't do anything else. And that Samir again is another very good example of an organisation
We don't rely on
who
the
does a
council.
lot of funding from other organisations. So, and I think that's what everybody needs to think about more and more, because there's less and less money.
Yes,
And
exactly.
You're going to exclude us.
Huh?
You need to exclude, I mean, like, for the baby bank, so to give you in terms of social return on investment, Kensington and Chelsea Baby Bank we run is not funded by RBKC, so zero pound investment. We avoid £569,000 worth of statutory cost every year supporting family and children services. So just to say, like, with zero investment from you. And I think I'd love to see the providers to look at your investment and how it saves money on your statutory costs. Because when there's less money, you have to find a fair way. And the best way is to not sacrifice, the statutory. So
That's a
it
very-
needs to
a
be
very
actual
good point.
savings. It needs to be savings.
And that's why we're looking at where, the money is put.
Yeah.
To try and stop people going into
Because
statutory services.
what we don't want is if some of these smaller charities just don't survive, then they will come back to us in some form of cost of council.
So that's why it's really important the sector talks to each other.
Billy,
Just to go back to the data side, and I mean that previous point that the chair brought up, which is around the ethnicity. My question is, if that's when you said that you're looking at deprivation and that's sort of the target, that's the objective, and then also need and making sure the funding is balanced. Do you think that I question the quality of the data just because of that exceptional amount. How does that feed into, say, the scorecards that you're looking at when you're doing the assessments for which organisation we'd be considering funding? And is that data reliable when we're looking at things like who's been funded in the past and so on?
Well, when we're looking at deprivation data, we're looking at government sources for that data. And that's what we're kind of things like the index of multiple deprivation, but also looking at where the housing tenure, alongside information around mortality rates as well and life expectancy. So we are looking beyond the data that we collect for this round of Voluntary Support Fund, but also we are not, because you said this data is not as robust as it could be. We went on to Flint halfway through the round of Voluntary Support Fund. So we are looking at other sources of data with regards to the reality of what the situation is around deprivation in the borough, rather than what.
I think I can get more around the answer, because we went for Project One and I've got the live data. It shows 45% of our participants are in Nottingham, which is one of the worst. We've got Goulburn has 22.3% and we have Colville 16.6%. So I think for us, as the way we work, I think we take the demographics and we look at the index of multiple deprivation, but we're looking at the GSNA and targets. And now we're in COVID, we work in partnership with Octavia, so we will be targeting residents around the Reed Centre, because there's a pocket of deprivation, as well as Delgado, working with the Housing Association on the estate. So that's how we can show that actually we intervene where the needs are, because there's no point getting funding just for the sake of it. Do you know what I mean? So
And
So,
we're
but we
expecting-
have that data, and if we fund it by the council, like with the grant for project funds, we can report with details in terms of where our intervention is and the outcomes, and we can measure, and we can also calculate the social return on investment.
And we're expecting for all the applications for them to be able to do so. So that's a key area that will be assessed. If they don't demonstrate that they are reaching and dealing with the issues in the local area, then they will get a lower score.
Okay, any other questions from the committee? Do you have a question?
Yes, I do. Again, I live in the south of the borough, so a lot of the conversations that you guys have had, I'm not aware of. But I do have a huge concern about the lack of services that we have in south of the borough. And the ones that we have traditionally been chopped off. And more recently, Laura, you've been involved in trying to support the big local, which if we're talking about what you want in terms of data, it seems extremely unfair to lose that service when that service is meeting a lot of social needs, and not just that, but has been able to demonstrate the value in terms of social return. Part of their problem has been, and it was exactly the same with the Neighbourhood Advice Centre, it's very difficult to get match funding if your local authority has withdrawn that support.
So Amelia, can I just pick up on that? So Big Local was funded by the Big Lottery and their funding ran out. RBS has served us for 3 years. Their funding ran out not that long ago. So of course we had no funding for them. So Gavin, who I think you met, well, you know Gavin, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
Gavin has been meeting with Vanessa and trying to help her a lot. And I know Laura's been helping and Hina, but it is really difficult right now. So I know she's got some funding at the moment. I don't know whether she's applied for this round.
That's the
No, but she's applied to the BSSF.
I'm not sure.
No, I think they just became a charity
She's
last
only just
year,
looking
and they
to-
don't have any published annual accounts.
They don't, and that's another problem with the match funding. And lots of the funders want 2 years of accounts. So she is in a really difficult position, but I think she does have a bit of funding at the moment. I know Gavin is working with her to try and help her because, as you say, lots of people value her service.
I think the what you guys are saying in terms of, you know, organizations need to go out and make this money. We kind of lose sight of the fact that the majority of these organizations have been established organically, mainly by people who have experienced or been there and picked up the flag, as it were, and so they may not have the skills, knowledge, and know-how to reach out.
Yeah.
Now
That's
that
what Gavin is helping her with.
yeah, but having said that, I think that there needs to be, now that you guys have made this decision, there is, I would have hoped, some kind of responsibility for you guys to bring these people that have actually made your jobs easier in delivering services to the community and supporting them through that journey, supporting them for them to have those conversations. Because to be honest, traditionally, RBKC has been a divisive council. In the south of the borough, people don't talk to each other because the perceptions are that have been laid down by history. And so this is a really good opportunity, and I hope that you will really take note of this in working with providers, active working, bringing them in, doing workshops, supporting them to get the know-how, the experience, and also by doing that, demonstrating that the council understands that, for instance, just because I've put it out there, the Big Local has that particular glitch, but they do have a history of service provision. And how do you then bridge that gap so that an organisation doesn't lose out because it just so happens that they're a new organisation
Can I-
on paper.
Can I just say that we did support Vanessa, and we're doing monthly cost of living support. I mean, it wasn't sustainable, but we do, I think there's other ways as well, and supporting kind, and also, because primarily we target people in social housing, and we being a Chilwell Residents Association, we're happy to go the extra mile. We now have our first electric van. So it wouldn't be, we have access to supplies and stuff. So I think there's also looking at different models of how we can help organizations survive in the South, because we get lots of inquiries from people from SW10 who come all the way to W10 for support. You shouldn't be like that.
And many can't.
And
Yeah.
but we also did the public health money with communities.
Yeah.
I know that you're part of that, and the big locals part of that.
Yeah, I think there is a bit of misunderstanding amongst residents, and I don't know what your experience is, councillor, in regards to what is the public health, what is it supposed to do?
Well, so that was funding specifically to target certain things, and I can't remember what you're targeting.
I mean, we wanted to do borough-wide because we're in all the wards, but we were given.
There was three of you, wasn't it, together,
Yeah,
I think, or two?
we were given 3 wards in the north, so we're doing the peer support and the healthy eating part of it.
So,
But what
so
we've
some
done,
people are doing blood pressure, some
Yeah,
people,
lung health.
it's all, lung
Yeah,
health. So
but-
different organisations are doing different
Okay,
things.
but I think what they need is
Sorry,
support.
Chair.
Can I just take it back to the committee
Yeah.
now? Do you have any further questions on this item? If not, I'll say thank you very much, Sarah and Moira, and we'll move on to the final, I think the final one. Which is the work programme.
Thank you.
If that's stuff.
Page what?
Page 74.
Yeah, I know, but it is there, so go through that.
Yeah.
So we had a discussion. Okay, sorry. Pre-meet, was only, she wasn't there. And this is, that's typed out what we discussed, so just to see if there's anything left out. We need to have the improvement plan following the C3 judgment of the regulator. We need to look at Lancaster West and the Nottingdale Heat Network.
I included the World's End.
I know you did, but I don't think we're going to do them together.
Okay. What are we gonna do then?
Because Lancaster West.
Did I jump the gun?
We have, if we do Lancaster West, yeah, then we will have to, and we have been told also by Overview and Scrutiny to do the Nottingdale Heat, whatever it's called. But we can't do that without looking at Lancaster West, so it's a different thing.
Fine. as
So
long as
we
it's
can
on the
look at
list.
Well's End, we can put that. I've got Well's End.
Yes,
down.
I wasn't sure if it was, yeah, I know, I think I jumped the gun, I was just
Okay.
ensuring. it was
Yeah,
there.
okay. So we've got Lancaster West and the Nottingdale Heat Network. We've got, and Pretty, you wanted to look at this as well. We've got major works contracts.
Yes.
So that's the procurement side of what you wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have got the Well's End estate.
Yes, we have the lifts and the meters that we wanted to look
Okay,
at.
we look at the, yeah, and perhaps the Cremorne estate as
Yes,
well at the
it's
same
a
time,
Cremorne.
yeah?
The meter installation and the lifts,
And the heat.
yeah.
Yeah, all of that.
Sorry, Lina, are you requesting that they give you the application that they've made for the lifts to the
Excuse
health and
me.
safety thing, or not? That's
Hello,
not
we're
part
just
of it.
trying to work out the work programme here.
This is what is in the agenda as to
Okay.
what we need.
Thank you.
Okay. Then we have got how the council communicates with residents. as an issue, and that came up today as well, didn't it? Residents engagement
Consultation.
strategy, that came up today. And we might look at older and disabled residents, state services. I have to say, Bella, what you sent round today about the sheltered accommodation, it missed out all the old people's homes in my ward. So does that not, do they not count as sheltered accommodation?
I would assume not, no, but I can ask officers for clarification on that point.
It's a bit more care
Private,
homes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think they'll come under more care homes.
is a sheltered accommodation a care home?
No. Sheltered accommodation is people who have some autonomy.
Yeah.
But they just need, if they just need that extra help, if somebody's around to help them out.
No, but we have, like, I have one which has been discontinued in my ward, which is called the Millicent Buller House, and they all have like little, they were able-bodied, they had little sort of studio flats, and then they had some communal rooms and etc. And they're decommissioning it, and they're decanting all the people. So there were about 40, there was provision for about 40 elderly people there, and it wasn't a care home, and they didn't need.
There won't be sheltered accommodation.
But it wasn't, they weren't there.
Or supported accommodation.
I think we need to, so what I think I'm trying to say is if we look at the older and disabled residents, I think we have to look at all of the types of the provision that we can, be it sheltered, be it care home, be it old people's home.
Or maybe services like in terms of, sorry, I'm going back to the World's and Estate Lives, that's how they are supported when these services are disrupted. If the disruption happens, how are the elderly, the disabled supported in terms of, care or any emergency? That was something that I had to really.
Okay, but we could look at that in the World's End Estate.
Yeah.
Services.
With sheltered accommodation and supported rather, is it about how much there is in the borough and planning for the future? Is that part of this question? Like what the provision
I
is
think
currently?
that the feeling is that we're losing some.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and what are we going to do about it?
Yeah,
I think that's the feeling.
yeah.
But what Bella sent me around today, which I read, I mean, it had things that I didn't recognise the establishments, but I've got Mary Fluck's house, I've got Women's Pioneer, I've got quite a lot in my ward, and we're losing one. So I think some of them weren't captured in it. So I think we would have to look at all the types.
Yeah, and we can agree older people sheltered accommodation is a priority now, and then later when we know when it's going to come to committee, we can and maybe hash out what exactly you want from the page.
Yeah.
And maybe you just need to understand what categories
Exactly, yeah.
this fall
Because it might
fall
then
under.
be a joint paper with housing needs and housing management, because sheltered accommodation is Jahed's portfolio, but
Yeah.
sponsored accommodation is Koja's, so it could.
Yeah, I think we need to understand the categories.
Yeah, we need to understand the
Yeah.
categories and what they are. It's like when we did the hostels, we didn't know what was what at the beginning. I said, okay, so then I've got temporary accommodation.
Which is carried over from, was that one of the ones that was previously? Yeah.
It was
Which is
previously.
why I'm- yeah.
Yeah, and then we had registered providers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so today we had suggested perhaps something about homelessness we could look at.
Sorry, Chair, are you saying in addition?
Yeah, I'm going through the list, which I think is, now I'm going through what was said today.
Okay, yeah, sure.
So I'm asking, is homelessness, it's something that people would like to look at? Or,
There is the rough sleeping and homelessness strategy, which was initially going to go to a leadership team in September, but it's now going in November, so the committee would be able to look at that paper in October.
I mean, I would be interested in that.
Sure, if there's space. I mean, if these one, I really agree with all these topics, so we can give them time, but of course, yeah.
okay, sleepers. Okay, so Bella, looking at what we've got, you don't want to add to the list, do you, because we won't have time for things, so.
That's a British word.
Okay, have we got room for all of these things, Bella?
Yeah, we do, yeah.
We do.
Right.
Okay, perfect, all right.
And we don't want to overload it, because
No.
if we
Yeah.
overload it, you never know what's gonna happen, and we might need to do some sort of emergency thing.
Quality or
Can we just do one can we do one recap? I think I think you said everything that I wanted you to say, but can we just do one?
Okay,
recap?
I'll do it. Improvement plan following the C3 judgment, which is about the regulator. The Lancaster West estate and the Nottingdale Keep network. Major contracts procurement. Well-
Can we add to the major contract procurement with, because we were talking about like complaints and workmanship and stuff like that, can we somehow get that in together?
No.
I think that's too big.
I think
No.
with the contracts, it could be the outcome of better run contracts.
We
Yeah.
It's
could
better
look at,
managed
yeah,
housing, but I don't think we need to necessarily inquire into that.
Fine.
with-
no,
Yeah,
I think if you look at something, you have to look at it in quite a small way, otherwise
yeah.
like it doesn't end. So what we could do is add looking into repairs, which was also
Yes,
something
yes,
that
yeah.
pretty wanted. So, okay, I'll go through it again then. Like the major works and looking at procurement contracts, Wales End Estate / Cremorne. We can look at the lifts and things like that in that one probably. How the council communicates with residents, so resident engagement strategy.
Can-
Is it good enough? Yeah.
Sorry, Chair, can I add to that engagement bit? It's probably in correlation, nothing additional that we might not have space, but this, I just wanted to be, how confident are we when we get these surveys or engagement from people? How confident are we that we are reaching wider community? Because sometimes very specific people attend
Yeah,
consultations.
that's true, and I think
And-
but I think that's part of
It's
it.
part of this.
It's looking
Okay,
at engagement,
Exactly.
and some people,
Maybe outreach to wider community, if you have.
there are always people it's difficult to reach. I think that's
Yeah,
the
Exactly.
facts of life,
Okay,
but
as long as it's.
we can certainly look into that as part of it. Okay, so then we're gonna look at older and disabled residents. Perhaps, okay, with care homes and. I'm not sure about that sort of thing. Perhaps sheltered accommodation, temporary accommodation.
Yeah.
Registered providers. The rough sleeping, because that would be something for the next meeting, the KD. And then repairs. Is that enough?
That would fill every meeting.
That's it.
And it could be pretty thorough.
So we can maybe narrow them down a bit, or change them slightly, but broadly that's what we're gonna do.
Do we need to prioritise them? Or,
They partly timing prioritises themselves with the KD coming, whatever. I think the Lancaster West is going to take quite a bit of one meeting. So, and that probably we can't do in October, so maybe
Yeah.
later on. But,
Chair,
yeah,
can I have the audience?
We have a co-chair. That wasn't me. Hold on, Tim.
Claire,
I just wanted to ask, A, are you going to have a working group?
I was just gonna get onto that.
Sorry. And B, there are a couple here that haven't been mentioned that I wonder whether you might want to have on standby or have a watching brief or something, which is the Grenfell Curve Legacy Group.
Yeah,
Because there
okay.
were commitments made by the committee to meet with
Yeah.
them, and that for some reason was not
Yeah,
arranged.
okay, yeah,
And also the management and allocation of community assets, which is a big piece around trust in the council and the Grenfell inquiry commitments.
okay, so we'll put those on standby. And about working groups, I really do want to have a working group. But the community's all new, so they have to kind of get to grips with what they want to do, and if someone wants to do it, Bella can say something about there are different ways of doing the
Yes,
the working groups, not just one way.
So there are a few different ways we could do it. Because with when Marie-Therese chaired the hostels working group, that was like a year-long project. The previous committee did a working group on consultation, which was a scrutiny in a day session. So that was different. It was over one day. And they basically asked questions of different officers in the council about how we do consultations. So that was more of a shorter, sharp working group that I think it started and finished within 2 months. So.
And so a working group would normally be about 3 councillors.
Yeah.
And you can also get a councillor from another committee. You can second someone onto it as well. So I think it follows majority as well. So it probably would be 2 Tories, 1 Labour. I think that's the way it goes, isn't it? Usually, and then maybe you could get, if somebody could get co-opted onto it as well.
We can decide that.
I think what you have to do is think about what we've got this list now. Think about what you're really interested in and how you'd like to do it. Because when I did the hostel working group, that really did take quite a lot of time. So you've got to.
The major works and tracks one. So if that was ever a subject of a working group, the advantage of it, because you just talked about having other committees involved. And it feels like there's also something that would be related to overview and scrutiny and investment committee. You know, it's quite a big topic. Would that be something that we'd consider?
Yeah, you could do it. Yeah.
Is that useful or is that not?
Or maybe Jackie'd like to say something. We did have a report on procurement once, didn't we?
Yeah, so
A very big one.
it's kind of split. So this committee would look at, and I think this is what you're talking about, and you can tell me if I'm wrong. I think you're talking about major procurement in relation to the housing revenue account and the housing stock, rather than all of the properties in the council owns. So that would sit here. Overview and scrutiny looks at procurement generally, the strategy, and then something more specific around housing could come here. But Marie-Therese, as she said, is also on overview. So she's the link between this committee and what's going on elsewhere. All of the chairs are on there.
She as well.
Oh, yes, sorry, Preeti, you're the vice chair. I'm sorry. It's too late, I'm tired. So yeah, it's a really good idea. That's why we have an overview committee with different members to join things up. So that could, when you go to overview on the 8th of July,
I could mention
that because that committee at that meeting will look at all of the work programmes from all of the committees to look at where should things be joined up, you know, the synergies, any gaps, and Marie-Therese, if she wants, could sort of lead on that, and Preeti can back her up as a member as well of both committees.
Sorry, Chair, if I may. And Jackie, would you think that that's, I mean, I'm all for it. I think that would be a topic that I would take. Do you think that is a good topic to take?
If that's everything that councillors are interested in, then yes, absolutely. It's your work programme, as I said at the induction.
Yes.
But there seems to be a lot of interest in this committee, and it links into comments that have been made at the meeting about residents and residents' concerns. I'm sure residents are very interested in this as well.
I mean, all I would say, so choosing, I mean, obviously I don't want to chair the working, but when choosing the working, do something that really interests you. That's the thing, because you might, I mean, certainly the hostels took quite a lot of time, so you've got to do something you care about.
Could we just add at least once a year the TCC to come to you and give them assessment on improvement? We've got some amazing people on the TCC from across the borough who worked really hard in terms of helping our BKC improve. So it'd be nice for them to be invited at least once a year to give you their own assessment of where we are with progress. I think they're very capable.
Actually, Chair, I think that's a very good recommendation. I mean, I don't know what you think. I think that's a very good recommendation.
I'd imagine there are quite a few places where.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering, in terms of developing the resident engagement strategy and the working group that might call for, or even repairs, or any of these points, is there any space to have residents be part of the working group, especially in developing the resident engagement strategy?
You can co-opt member. I think you can
Um,
co-opt, you can
You
co-opt.
can, do you want me to, is it helpful?
Yeah,
Right.
Jackie.
So we have a co-optee policy. So if they can't co-opt, there's no provision for co-opting people onto this committee at the moment. But residents can be co-opted onto working groups, but also what I'd recommend is that a working group actually speaks to residents. So it's not just about co-opting people. You might want to arrange some resident sessions, and you've talked here tonight about speaking to a broad representation of residents. So you can do that, the more people that you get to speak to. So there was a working group, the Environment Select Committee set up on flood risk management. The resident was co-opted onto that, so you can do that. That was someone with particular expertise. But Bella would work with the committee. If the committee wanted to have any focus groups or sessions with residents, you can do it that way. And Marie-Therese can explain what she did, obviously, with the going out with the hostels working group is a good example for going out and about.
Yeah, I mean, you should go everywhere around the whole borough, so it was quite interesting, but it was a lot of work.
I think in the interest of what we've been saying about, because ultimately it's how are you guys going to do a job that is going to benefit ensuring or towards RBKC being the best place to live.
Yeah,
We've had that struck line for forever. And I feel that certainly with some of the work that I've been doing in the way that residents are engaged, you miss the spirit of it if you don't have us along from beginning to end.
so something else we haven't talked about, because I think we might be able to have an extra meeting if we want. We could have sort of a conference kind of thing, or a discussion about resident engagement. We could get people to come in and you know, do it like that. Could you?
Before you finish, I just wondered, which is the Grenfell item for this year?
That is a very good point.
There's a recommendation being a better social landlord, and I understand there's an overlap with communities, but I think it really should be here.
Yeah.
Because we've said that Grenfell is not just for people in the north, it's all the residents in the south who had the experience of the TMO and living in RBKC council properties, and we don't hear often from them. So I think if there's a place where we can all work together and scrutinize and recommend how to meet this public commitment, I think it should be in this committee.
Okay, I think we must think about that one and what we could do. I mean, we are doing Lancaster West,
It's not just like
and
it's the way.
the judgment is late.
Just thinking aloud, I think as we do Lancaster West, will we not learn the lessons from it and apply to?
No,
We, under Chair of Bramley House, we are managed by the Lancaster West neighborhood team. I think from the get-go, there was a focus on Lancaster West estate. The Lancaster West estate is not the immediate community affected. They've got affected people, but there's people equally on Chichester estate. And I think we need to move away because we are ignoring people in the world who have suffered at the hands of the TMO, traumatized by the way they've been treated. They have to have a voice in that legacy. So yes, we can talk about the refurbishment of the Lancaster West estate, but in terms
Okay,
of the
I
change.
think we have to think about that, because we've got a full list now. We could look at the Grenfell Projects Fund
Or the Cove Legacy?
or the Curve Legacy. Yeah. So I think we're going to have to think. I'm going to have to sit down with Bella, with Bella, but also with the calendar to see how we can fit everything in. Okay. Okay, folks, I think we've got enough to work with. We might have slightly too much, or we will work it out. And thank you all for your output. I hope you're all happy happy with the work programme?
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Bella.
Also, just to
And I know.
said work that is, this change.
You want on with what items?
And also to apologise for the amount of stuff that Bella's been sending around, but I think it's just background information. It's,